Are you familiar with what localization is?
Not in the sense that I think you're referring to, so explain.
So localization is essentially the process of taking a game that is in a language. In this case, we'll just use this example as Japanese, but it really applies to anywhere that needs to be translated, and and translating it to in this case, the local. Yes, but here's the thing. So you'll notice I said translation, but the profession, the thing that is actually done, is called localization. And translation is simple. You know what translating is. Translating from one language to the other. Localization is kind of this amorphous term that like changes depending on what decade of culture you happen to be in, right? What the idea is that it's like, oh, this joke has to do with Japanese culture, so it doesn't really work. We got to change it to something else. Or, oh, this references a location in Japan that people overseas may not understand, so we got to, change it. And on paper, that sounds nice, right? Like you make it so that like you can understand something without necessarily needing to look at like a translator's note or reading up on cultural history and stories like that, right? Like on paper, that sounds right to you, correct?
Yeah.
It has not been that simple for like 20 years. And in the last 10 years, it's gotten particularly egregious because basically what typically happens is you have these people, they squeak their way into these companies, or they squeak their way into these contracts, and they mangle these stories and these characters and the intent. The biggest thing I like to put forward is you kind of know how a lot of anime, as you probably noticed growing up, some of them seem a little kooky, a little wacky, or they have like these quirks. A lot of that is just Americanization of it from these kind of companies. So like if you ever saw an anime on a Saturday morning cartoon and you thought it was a little wacky or out there, don't get me wrong, some of that is there, but a lot of that has to do with these people translating it a certain way and changing the meaning behind certain things. And what that's led to is like Marvel-esque quirkiness in a lot of these things. If you have sensitive topics related to like gender, like, women aren't shown in a good light, so we got to remove this dialogue altogether, and you'll have something like you have a medieval setting where a guy is being demeaning to a woman because that's how people were back then. There's that power structure between man and woman. They'll change the dialogue so it's not even there, or they'll make the guy look like a dunce or something like that. Lately, there's been a whole thing, obviously with the whole gender shit going on. You have, men that are a bit more effeminate get turned into gay men or trans women, or you have, you've had games that they'll literally take white characters and make them black. You have all these really crazy things that have been going on in the localization industry, and what always happens is you always get into arguments with people that say like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't read Japanese, so you can't tell it's wrong." Even though you'll have like a literal translation in front of you, and then you'll have like the dialogue next to it that got translated for you and put in the game, and you'll be like, "Hey, I may not know how to speak Japanese, but I have this verified translation, and I have the product that it was given to me, and it's wrong," but they'll just lie to your face and say it's not happening. So what Capcom did, their localization team did, they came out recently and they said, we need to be culturally sensitive. Character design and development must be culturally sensitive. If it's not acceptable, it might need to be changed. We play a crucial role in making sure these things are appropriate for certain. Crucial role. And you have localization efforts extend to promoting inclusivity through language. I'm reading a lot of this verbatim. Like this is the shit they say. It's just like, we got to address gender-specific language and cultural norms and diverse perspectives. We got to create an immersive experience that's the same, but we got to change it. That's the kind of shit that they spin. Now, why a lot of people started paying attention to this in particular is because, like I said, there is always a group of people out there that will just argue to the death, like the brain dead activist types online that are like, social justice warriors or virtue signalers. They will defend this stuff to the death, even when like the stuff is, put directly in front of your face, right? And I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys about these kind of mindsets. They just have no standards, right? It's one thing to look at the shit I say, because I'm a bit of a hard ass. I'm critical when it comes to certain things.
You're more than a bit of a hard ass. I'm sorry
yes, that's but I'll look at especially with like shit like remakes and respecting lore over sequels and polish and what people should expect. I'm very critical. Not everyone is going to be like me and like dock points if a remake changes a single line, even though they really should, or if a side character returns after 2 decades and acts completely differently, and they just say, oh, it's just an anime character, you don't care. I think they should care. The issue with localizing games from different countries, especially from Japan, it's entirely different because the people are so blatant with lying or just being completely and totally ignorant. It's like... imagine you're trapped in a burning building, right? It's a building you've lived in for quite some time. You like it there, and this is a building that you watched get set on fire. The arsonist is in eyeshot. The gear he used is visible. You've got a pretty good case, and you will point to that man and you will shout, the building is on fire, that guy over there, he's responsible, he did it. And before you can even finish talking, one of these people will crawl out of the burning woodwork and respond that not only is the building not on fire, but that you are the worst type of person they've ever met for even mentioning the possibility that the building could be set on fire by somebody. And before they're done telling you that, they themselves will be set on fire by the same arsonist who set the building on fire, who is now shouting, I set this building on fire. Now, forced to acknowledge that the building is indeed on fire and confronted with the arsonist responsible, that same person will look you dead in the eye and will tell you one or all of the following. The building is better on fire. The building has always been on fire. You never belonged in the building to begin with, and you are actually the problem, not the building being on fire. These people are so disingenuous and awful when it comes to this shit. It's remarkable. There have been so many examples of fan translations versus, official translations, and you're just like, wow, there's something wrong here, or like they've rewritten characters, or they've rewritten entire intent, or they've changed the entire way this character acts. And even in its most benign, it's making these games less interesting, or, making them laughingstocks. Like, I think a part of the reason that people have this view of Japanese media in general, I mean, this applies to anywhere, but we focus on Japanese because that's a big market. Part of the reason that people look at that and kind of scoff like, oh, it's wacky, or oh, they don't talk right, or they're weird, is because of these bad localizations. It really should just be translations. And hopefully with AI getting as big as it is, it we start to see some shifts in that. But the reason that things are the way that they are is because the Japanese guys don't always have an eye on their property. There's an incredibly harsh disconnect between the people who make the game, who are passionate or at least craftsmen of some respect, and the people who actually are handed these games to translate. Because if you look at any amazing game out there, normally there's passionate people behind it, or people who have been in the industry for a while, or just talented individuals. Then you have the localizer. 95% of them are bottom rung translators. This is a well-known fact in the industry, is if you can translate a language well, you don't go into entertainment. You go into legal work. Like you go into you go into politics, or you'll go and you'll translate really dense mechanical manuals, like important work that you can't screw up.
Really dense mechanical. That was like really specific.
Because it could be any manual, but I'm saying like, industrial stuff.
Well, that's the
like
thing that needs like really specific instructions.
Exactly.
So the translation's got to be perfect. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so you're left with these talentless people. A lot of them are failed writers that just want to supply. Like, honestly, if nobody's watching these people, they will just write their own stories on top of them, because people like there's very little double checking. And so basically all this boils down to is it's just another confirmation in a long series of like guesswork, where companies just don't know what they're doing with overseas stuff. It kind of falls into all like the inclusivity and the same kind of stuff that leads into the consulting companies that we've been talking about, because these same people have the same connections and the same stuff. But what's happening now is a lot of these people move to Japan and work their way up into the company. And why they do that is it's cheaper for the Japanese guys to just say, oh, we have it in-house, and it's supposed to build like, oh, you can't question the changes. The guys did it in their own in-house studio. And then like you look at the team that developed it, it's all a bunch of Japanese guys. And then you look at the translation team, and it looks like some tanned Californian, scrawny white guy and freaking some Indian guy. And it's just like, well, that's what happens with the translations, and it really shakes the faith in a lot of how these stories are told, because it's like they keep chipping away. It's like at first it's like, we're gonna nickel and dime you, and then we're gonna you know, we're not gonna hire the best people so the games aren't getting made well. And now in this aspect, a lot of these games that avoid all of that nonsense and then get imported to other countries are now being changed by the same kind of activists to fall more in line with that, and they're just going to keep changing more and more and get closer to the ear of the developers more and more. Like, it's already to the point where these people, they won't get the game at the end of the development process. They will get builds of the game early and say stuff like, oh, you know, this might be seen as offensive in some languages, or that skirt's too short, or you know, that this woman character is not shown in a great light and stuff like that. And it just keeps escalating. And near the bottom of this thing from Capcom, they actually mention, you know, that it's not limited to story. Like, they go as far as potentially changing gameplay if it's found to be offensive. So we'll see where that goes, but that was
some description, and I don't even know where to even begin, because I feel like it's all just the dollars and cents thing at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah, it's something that more people are being privy to, but it's like all the issues we've been talking about the last couple weeks. It's when they get brought to light, when they get shown, they are just going to dig in and get aggressive before they're out entirely. So they're starting now. There being a lot of companies like this are going to be open about it until it really hurts them, or until they literally just can't hide from it anymore. And unfortunately, Capcom for me is entering their next dark age. Like they had one that ran during their outsourcing period that kind of ended around 2017, and I'm glad Dragon's Dogma 2 came out. I'm worried about future projects from them. But, you know, we'll take it game at a time. But this does not bode well for the localization industry in general, because there's already tons of people like this on a smaller scale that tweet about how they would love to change the games more, and how they virtue signal to all their friends. And it's another thing that's just subverting the creative process and damages the integrity of the games.